Hello. Today I'm going to be giving a speech titled Pebble Mine, A Risk Too Great. Bristol Bay in western Alaska is home to the world's largest runs of wild Pacific salmon. For years, Alaska natives have called this area of the state home and utilized salmon for their subsistence and livelihoods. According to the Center for American Progress, fisheries of Bristol Bay account for 10,000 full-time jobs and $1.5 billion annually contributed to the economy. A proposed mine at the headwaters of major river systems entering Bristol Bay has been proposed, the Pebble Mine project. I have on my visual aid a map showing the location of this proposed mine at the headwaters of Bristol Bay. That map supplied by the Center for American Progress. The mine would be among the world's largest, with an estimated worth of $500 billion, a huge amount of mineral economy in the area. The proposed development of the Pebble Mine at the headwaters of Bristol Bay should not be authorized or allowed to take place, as it presents a large risk to the environment and people of the Bristol Bay region. I personally have worked both in mining and fishing, and I realize that the two industries do try to work together to make things work. However, in this case, the risk posed to Bristol Bay is just too great to allow the Pebble Mine project to take place. And the people who make their livelihood and live off of the resources in that area need to be protected. They should not be exposed to that risk. Mining releases toxic wastes. Some can be extremely harmful to the environment, people, animals, and they do end up in the environment at some point. Mine tailings are what is left over after processing ore to remove the precious minerals. The processed ore, the tailings, can contain arsenic, sulfuric acid, lead, zinc, and cadmium. These minerals are present in the mined rock, but after they are processed and placed in tailings, they're left at the surface, where those minerals can be allowed to enter the environment. Mining additives such as cyanide may also be present in tailings. Tailings dams are used to store the mining waste, and they can fail. That would release those tailings into the environment, possibly into rivers, affecting animals in those areas. Mining operations have historically caused damage to surrounding environments in the United States. According to the EPA, mining has contaminated headwaters in more than 40% of watersheds in the western United States. On my visual aid, I also show a map concerning fish alerts for states in the western United States. And as you can see, many states have numerous fish alerts, while Alaska has zero. And keeping Bristol Bay, or keeping the Pebble Mine out of Bristol Bay, would keep that number at zero. The contamination of Bristol Bay needs to be avoided. We cannot take that risk. There are 3 separate tailings dam failures documented by Gretchen Gavitt of PBS that I would like to share. A failure in Stava, Italy killed 269 people and destroyed 60 buildings. Another in Los Fraias, France, spilled into a river and contaminated farmland owned by over 5,000 farmers. It was no longer viable to be farmed. Another deadly failure in Kolantar, Hungary killed 10 people. Now, these events show that tailings dam failures are possible and they can severely damage people's lives and their livelihoods. My visual aid shows how large the tailings dams at Pebble Mine would be to contain that material, and they are huge, meaning a failure would release extreme amounts of tailings into the environment and cause serious damage. Apart from direct danger to human lives, the EPA states that a tailings dam failure would destroy salmon populations downstream. A tailings dam failure at Pebble would essentially destroy salmon populations in the Koktuli and Mulchatna rivers, and it could possibly affect the Nushagak River population. The chances of failure are 1 in 2,500 to 1 in 250,000. These statements are obtained from the EPA assessment done specifically for the Pebble Mine project. While a tailings dam failure is unlikely, in statistical terms, a failure would irreparably damage the environment and the livelihoods of those who depend on it. It is common practice to take into account the level of consequence associated with a structure while engineering or during construction. and to determine the feasibility based upon that. In this case, the consequences are too great to deem the project feasible. The level of risk is evident even among mining companies and Pebble supporters. They understand the risk involved with the Pebble Mine. In some cases, companies have determined the risk to be too great to further pursue the Pebble project or their involvement in it. According to the Associated Press, Rio Tinto, a large shareholder in Northern Dynasty Minerals, the company behind the development of Pebble, has given away their shares totaling $16 million worth to the Alaska Community Foundation and the Bristol Bay Native Corporation Education Foundation. A previous owner, Anglo American PLC, pulled out of the project in 2013 and they don't want anything to do with it anymore. Reasoning for these exits from the project are related to International Finance Corporation guidelines for companies. Large mining companies must operate under IFC guidelines on safety and environmental practice in order to obtain loans and financing. This means that a company must show respect for the environment and not cause damage that will not be repairable in order to obtain loans or financing from these banks. They have to have good standing environmentally. Shareholders might have pressured Rio Tinto and Anglo American PLC to divest, as there is a public perception of the mine, and those are publicly traded companies. However, this is normal operating procedure since a company's first responsibility economically is towards the shareholders. As they are essentially owners of that company, if they feel uncomfortable with the project or do not want the company to pursue, the company should take notice of that and act appropriately, which they have. Most importantly, Native groups and those who make their livelihood from Bristol Bay are opposed to the mine and do not feel the risk is worthwhile. These people have been living in Bristol Bay far before mining came to Alaska, and the fish and environment are what sustain their livelihoods. According to Aaron McKittrick of Trekking Alaska, the Nunamata Alukutieska Council of 8 local Native corporations and the regional corporation, Bristol Bay Association, oppose the mine. Outside of Native Alaskan tribes and corporations, commercial fishermen, sport fishermen, tourism industry operators, and even ex-Senator Ted Stevens oppose the Pebble Mine. In total, 70% of Alaskan citizens oppose the development of the Pebble Mine. Those opposed may not be scientists, and they may be somewhat biased as it's happening in their own backyard and in their state, but they are taking the issue seriously. They are basing their arguments upon research that they have done and a fear of the risk that could greatly affect them. Those who are opposed are taking on most of that risk for their lives and for their environment around them. So they should play a large part, and their opinions do matter very much. The Pebble Mine does pose a risk to the Bristol Bay ecosystem and to those who utilize it and should not be authorized. Evidence that I presented indicates that there is a considerable risk to the environment and those who depend on it, and that even small risk can have large consequences in an operation such as Pebble Mine. No risk is acceptable to those who depend on Bristol Bay salmon. To demonstrate the overall message of this speech, I would like to present this quote from Pebble Partnership CEO John Shively. I've said many times and will continue to say that if you have to make a choice between mining and fish, you choose fish every time. There's no question about that. It's a renewable resource for commercial activity, sport activity, and most importantly, subsistence. So it can't be a choice. I and most Alaskans agree with the leader of the group for the Pebble Mine project. There should be no choice.